Well, let's just talk about some of this. I mean, the mining sector recording the highest score across any sector. What was fueling that confidence among the CEOs that you surveyed?
Correct. Well, the basic materials sector, which is largely mining companies, it recorded a 90% increase in confidence in total across the sector. 33% of this was increased sentiment towards economic conditions. And so 140% surge in the confidence of CEOs to raise capital, which was quite large there too. The reason for this, which comes as no surprise, is I think considering government's stance on the nationalisation of mines, which was given to the public at the Mining Indaba in February, as well as at the President's State of the Nation address. As well as that, also continued low interest rates as well as high commodity prices, definitely fueling confidence in that sector.
When it comes to commodities, though, one of the things that we have seen we do see that we're in generally a trend where commodities are trading a bit higher right now. But just considering some of what's happening in the global economy, there have been concerns about growth in China, for instance. Did the CEOs indicate, about any kind of, bearish sentiment with what's happening in the global economy? Particularly with miners.
Yeah, well, a lot of the investment comes globally, but we found that across the index, the basic materials companies seem to be very bullish, so that didn't seem to factor in, as well as this, so-called serious tax on the companies that are going to be producing high profits also didn't seem to affect it too much.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the financial sector. That seemed to have recorded, the lowest in terms of their confidence, and one of the concerns there was what was happening in the Eurozone. When do you think, when you speak to these CEOs that are working in the financials, when do they see the trend, kind of turning into their favor?
Yeah, correct as you say that they did have the lowest level of confidence. A bit unfair maybe to say, because there was still a 12% rise in the total confidence in that sector, which in itself is nothing to be looked down upon. As far as the questioning goes, it's looking 6 months forward, the actual index, so there was no actual date as to where they expect an upturn.
When you look at these numbers, though, I mean, it's quite impressive, just the jumps that we did see across the board. I mean, we're talking about 12% in a sector that performed lowest in this index. What does it mean for you?
Well, a 20% increase on the whole, as you say, that is a large increase, possibly as a result of the European Central Bank's liquidity injection into the Eurozone, as you say, as well as the fairly strong data coming out of the US. But I guess what it means is that the fears of being soothed as that we could be experiencing a credit crunch, or the main thing is that there's growing sentiment towards stability within the economy again.
Well, we've been talking, earlier on when Alicia and I started, we talked about, what's happening right now in the US, and, there's this discussion about whether there is going to be more quantitative easing coming into the economy, and just what that means on the markets, and also the question comes in of, how well is the global economy doing when you've got the biggest economy on the globe, thinking of, their job growth not looking so good, and Alicia was just talking about in her interview, just that could we be doing as well as we think we're doing? So just talk to us a little bit about what you think this index would look like at the end of the 6 months, when, where this number is looking at.
Right. I think, 2011 was completely dominated by economic fears, whether it was to do with Europe or to do with America, and then more recently to do with China. So, I think at the time when the survey results came out, with you saying as to how well are we really doing, we came off a very low base. So just the fact that all that came out, this kind of positive sentiment came out at the same time, means that CEOs are really looking to the future with a positive outlook.
And let's talk a little bit about what you see happening in the next index.
What we found in this index was that the lowest rise in confidence came in the consumer services sector. So the consumer services sector is largely made up of retail as well as travel and tourism companies. And this is perhaps an indication that the effects of the rising fuel prices, as well as the electricity hikes and probable increases in tolls coming in. So, when all these become effective, that we'll definitely see the consumer services sector possibly bringing out even lower data, depending on how they see it going
That's actually
forward.
quite interesting, because when we looked at the consumer index, the consumer confidence index, it seemed as though, you know, consumers were feeling as though they were in a much better position than at the last reading. What do you make of that?
I think possibly the consumer goods side of that increasing sentiment there, whereas the consumer services side, which is more highly affected by the factors I mentioned just now, lowering sentiment.
When we
That's
look at, for instance, you know, with the CEOs, we're talking about people that are right at the top of the companies, you know, who really know what's happening in their industry. So this confidence coming through is a good indication of where business is right now. If you just to look at these numbers, I know you don't look at this when you do the survey, but just reading at the numbers and reading what the CEOs were saying to you, can this confidence, do you think, translate into employment?
I think it definitely can, and you know, talking about employment also, one of our bonus questions that we had within this conference was the ability of the 2012 national budget speech to actually maintain macroeconomic stability and to support enterprise and job creation. We had a 55% positive response to that. So CEOs believe that it can, and hopefully that'll infiltrate into the markets, and it can then too.